The hidden truth about women's nipples, psychology and reality. Few parts of the human body spark as much curiosity, confusion, and cultural debate as a woman's nipples. Often oversexualized in media, yet essential in biology, they carry deep layers of psychological, social, and emotional meaning that most people never truly explore. Let's begin with biology. Nipples play a vital evolutionary role, breastfeeding. During pregnancy and after childbirth, they become the center of a life-sustaining process. But beyond nurturing, they're not passive features. The skin, nerve, endings, and muscle fibers around the areola are incredibly responsive, reacting to touch, temperature, and hormonal shifts. This sensitivity reflects the body's complex design for both function and connection. Now, let's look at the psychology. Why are women's nipples treated as taboo when men have them too? This difference isn't biological. It's cultural. Psychologists call it sexual dimorphism in perception, the tendency to assign different meanings to similar traits based on gender. In most societies, men's chests are normalized and visible, while women's are censored. This isn't because women's nipples are inherently sexual, but because cultural conditioning shapes how we perceive them. Research shows that repeated exposure shapes emotional responses. In societies where the female body is seen as natural, people react with less discomfort or shame. In more conservative cultures, however, that same image triggers shock, not due to biology, but due to learned behavior. Here's another fascinating insight. Scientific studies reveal that nipple stimulation activates the same brain regions as genital stimulation. In other words, the brain recognizes this area as part of the sexual and emotional response system. It highlights how deeply connected human touch, bonding, and pleasure truly are. So what's the real shock? It's not the nipple itself. It's our reaction to it. The discomfort comes from cultural beliefs, not nature. When we understand the psychology behind this, it opens a larger conversation about body acceptance, gender equality, and mental well-being. In the end, women's nipples aren't just biological features. They're symbols of nurture, sensitivity, and misunderstood power. The true revelation isn't in their existence, but in how little we allow ourselves to understand them. Part 2. The deeper psychology behind women's nipples. What society doesn't tell you, when we strip away cultural filters, what remains is pure human biology and psychology. Yet society rarely allows open, honest discussions about women's nipples. Why? Because they sit at the intersection of nature, nurture, and social control. Let's break that down. Symbolism and social power. Throughout history, the female chest has symbolized both creation and control. In ancient cultures, exposed breasts were signs of fertility, life, and divine power. In contrast, modern societies often use censorship and modesty rules to regulate how women express their bodies. This shift shows how cultural narratives shape body image, turning something natural into something controversial. Psychologically, this control can create inner conflict, where women feel both pride and shame about the same body part. 2. Body image and mental health research in body psychology reveals that how women perceive their nipples or breasts affects their self-esteem and emotional confidence. Media exposure, beauty standards, and social judgment often create unrealistic expectations about what a normal body should look like. This leads to body dissatisfaction, anxiety, or even avoidance behaviors. But when women learn that variation is normal, in size, color, shape, and sensitivity, it often leads to greater body acceptance and reduced stress about appearance. 3. Touch, trust, and emotional bonding. Psychologically, the nipple area is connected to emotional intimacy. When touched with care, it can trigger the release of oxytocin, the bonding hormone that strengthens feelings of closeness and trust between partners. This reaction shows that pleasure is not just physical, it's deeply emotional. The same region that nourishes a child also builds connection between adults, showing how the brain links nurturing with love and trust. The shame cycle. Many women grow up internalizing the idea that their bodies are something to hide. Over time, this leads to what psychologists call sexual guilt conditioning, the belief that natural pleasure or curiosity about one's own body is wrong. This shame doesn't just affect confidence, it can also suppress healthy communication in relationships. Recognizing and breaking this cycle is essential for psychological freedom and body positivity. Cultural desensitization and change. Here's something interesting. In cultures or communities where female toplessness isn't sexualized, people's brains respond differently. MRI studies show that when exposure is normalized, emotional reactions become neutral. This means the taboo isn't instinctual, it's taught. As society evolves, discussions about body autonomy, consent, and gender equality are helping to reshape how we view the female form, moving from censorship to understanding and acceptance. In short, women's nipples are not simply anatomical features. They're psychological mirrors, reflecting how societies define modesty, power, and femininity. When we approach this topic with education instead of taboo, we open doors to healthier self-perception, emotional intelligence, and equality. Part 3. Emotional intelligence, hormones, and cultural psychology. Now that we understand the biological and psychological layers, let's explore how the brain and emotions interact with this often misunderstood part of the female body. The cause. Emotional brain connection. Every physical response in the body begins in the brain. When a woman's nipples are stimulated, the limbic system, the area that processes emotion and memory, becomes active. This is why touch in this region can evoke not just physical pleasure, but also emotional warmth, safety, and affection. For many women, the reaction is not purely sensual, it's deeply tied to feelings of being cared for and emotionally secure. Psychologists call this emotional anchoring, when the body associates touch with trust and comfort. Hormones and the chemistry of connection. Biologically, nipple stimulation can trigger the release of oxytocin and dopamine, the same hormones responsible for love, bonding, and reward. Oxytocin, sometimes called the love hormone, strengthens attachment and empathy. Dopamine activates the brain's pleasure center, reinforcing positive emotional experiences. Together, they help explain why even gentle or affectionate touch can create a sense of emotional intimacy that extends beyond the moment. This reaction isn't just sexual, it's neurological proof of how the human body builds connection. How society shapes emotional expression. Cultural conditioning often teaches people, especially women, to suppress emotional and physical responses tied to pleasure. This suppression can create an inner conflict between what the body feels and what the mind believes is acceptable. Psychologists suggest that acknowledging natural responses, without guilt or shame, improves emotional regulation and relationship satisfaction. When individuals understand that the body's signals are healthy and natural, they can connect more authentically with themselves and others. Media, morality, and modern perception. The way media portrays women's bodies continues to influence how people interpret emotions connected to the chest area. For decades, film and advertising have mixed sensuality with objectification, turning something natural into a symbol of desire rather than identity. However, new cultural movements focused on body neutrality and education are changing that narrative. Instead of idealizing or censoring, they promote awareness and respect, helping people separate emotional truth from media-driven expectations. The path toward emotional freedom, understanding. The psychological and hormonal realities behind. Women's nipples can actually promote emotional intelligence. It teaches self-awareness, realizing that feelings of comfort, sensitivity, or even vulnerability are part of being human, not something to hide. When society learns to view these reactions through a scientific and emotional lens, body acceptance and empathy naturally increase. In essence, what society has long treated as a taboo subject is, in reality, a window into human connection and emotional depth. Women's nipples are not just symbols of attraction or motherhood, they're bridges between biology, psychology, and emotion. By replacing stigma with understanding, we not only normalize the conversation, but also move one step closer to a world where self-acceptance and equality go hand in hand. Part 4. The final truth. Understanding, not censoring. After all the Satodayan, science, psychology, and culture, what's the ultimate truth about women's nipples? It's that the real shock isn't in the anatomy itself. It's in how society has learned to react to it. 1. From shame to understanding. For generations, women have been taught to hide, censor, or feel embarrassed about parts of their own bodies that are completely natural. But modern psychology and neuroscience remind us that acceptance begins with awareness. When we learn to view the body through the lens of biology and emotion, not fear or judgment, shame starts to disappear. And with that, confidence and self-respect take its place. The psychology of acceptance, accepting the human body as it is, doesn't encourage indecency. It encourages mental and emotional health. According to researchers, people who develop body neutrality, the mindset of neither idolizing nor criticizing their bodies, experience higher self-esteem and lower anxiety. That's because understanding replaces insecurity.